Welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for coming out.
Good group tonight. Thank you guys for coming out on this wonderful Tuesday. And as always, we want to say hello to the online group. So on the count of three, we're going to say hello. You guys can do that, right? Here we go. 1, 2, 3.
Hello.
So hi, everybody online. Thank you guys for joining us. I know we've got people all over the country and all over the world. So thank you for being with us tonight. We're really grateful. Tonight's going to be exciting. It's a subject matter that we're all very familiar with. Unfortunately, we're somewhat too familiar with it, which is we're talking about excess fat gain. We as a society, we're going in the wrong direction, and tonight we're going to show you it's kind of the art and science of how to lose excess fat and keep it off forever. How's the forever part sound? Good? All right, y'all ready to dive in? Yeah. Okay, let's get to it. Here we go.
So fat, what on earth is fat? Is fat good or is it bad? It depends on several factors. Number one, there are ideal ranges. There are ranges for men and there are ranges for women. The ranges for women are between 18 and 28%. And the ranges for men, 10 to 28%. There's this thing called sarcopenia. Did you know that you can be skinny fat? That you can actually be thin and be overweight? We know that we really want to avoid weight loss plans, right? They're not good. They're not good for us. And with understanding fat tonight, you're going to learn that we need to abandon the scale weight. We've stated emphatically over and over and over before, and we're going to do it again, that weight loss plans are absolutely misguided and should be avoided. We've got to avoid them. Any plan that has weight loss as a component must have strategies in place to address body composition, reducing excess fat, and increasing lean muscle mass.
This is 5 pounds of muscle tissue. Some of you have seen this before. This is actually 5 pounds of fat or adipose tissue. The million-dollar question becomes, which one's bigger? Anybody venture to guess that one? Which one's bigger? Is it the one over here or the one over here? It's the one over here. It's bigger because it takes up more space. Now, here's a trick question for you. Don't get fooled. Which one weighs more? No, they weigh the same. They weigh the same. They're both 5 pounds. Everybody gets tripped up. This is the trick right here. Unfortunately, this is why weight loss plans are destined and doomed to fail every single time. We want the weight to go down, but at the sacrifice of this, it is never worth it, okay? Unfortunately, here's what we need to focus on, or fortunately from this point forward, less of this and more of this. If you focus on less of this and more of this, you don't care what the scale says because it does not matter. It makes the scales irrelevant. But I promise you the scales are going to line up with what you want it to. You might be surprised to know that Dr. Michelle, in all of her gigantic self, test out morbidly obese on the BMI measurement. Does that shock you? She's morbidly obese on the BMI. So how useful is the BMI? I don't think she's morbidly obese. I think she's absolutely hot, drop-dead, gorgeous.
But then it gets back to body composition.
That's right.
And we get
I was talking about every bit
scale.
of her life, actually, to be honest with you.
So back to the plan. The epitome of plans is the one that we're going to talk to you about tonight, one that actually restores your health, and it restores it in all aspects, and it focuses on helping you optimize a guided, long-term, permanent lifestyle change. So long-term lifestyle change. We want this to change your mind, change your heart, and get into your life for life.
So how many like the concept of permanent? Isn't that good? So here's some cool fat facts. I thought we'd come out with some fat facts because how many have heard anything that's factual about fat before? Probably not much. So here's some fat facts that you can count on. First of all, adipose tissue is made of adipocytes or fat cells, and they're all over the body, and they have this main purpose to store energy. Not all bad right there, right? So they store energy. It's also produced through the body through the absorption of fats that are presented or given or present after foods are consumed. Okay, that's where fats come from. Broken down by the body, yielding two byproducts, glycerol and fatty acids. Okay? Now, there's some more fat facts here that are kind of cool. The liver processes this glycerol into glucose and stores as energy. Pretty cool too. And fatty acids, finally, are those that provide energy for all major tissues, especially the cardiac, skeletal, and guess what? The brain. So the brain needs fat. The next time someone calls you a fathead, you simply say thank you. You want to be a fathead. So here is the dilemma that we all face. Could it be a problem if we consume too many fats? The answer is quite likely yes, it is. Because we know that the body absorbs these fatty acids and converts them to the fatty acids or glycerol by what's given to the body as far as food goes. So if we eat too many, that could be a problem. So this is not a situation like sometimes a lot of Americans do. If a little's good, a whole lot's better. And that's unfortunately where we've gone these days with some of the Paleolithic style of eatings. We say, well, if fat's good, then we need to eat a whole lot of it. But we cannot neglect the clear situation. If you take in more calories than you expend, it's going to be an energy overload and you're going to put on extra fat tissue. Okay?
So what about the types of fat and how do we store fat? There are more than one type of fat. It's just not all this white fat that we've been taught to think. We actually have brown fat. Brown fat is composed of small droplets and they contain iron and they actually do contain mitochondria. So they are thermal energy producing cells and their purpose is to actually generate heat. And this brown fat is actually developed from the myotone in the embryo and you're born with it. It's mainly in young individuals and it kind of degenerates as we get a little bit older, but its design is to help us create heat. White fat, as we well know, that yellow fat, which is around the viscera, it's around our legs, it comes from a single droplet. It has far less mitochondria, which means it burns far less energy in it. It may provide some pillow or cushioning, but it doesn't really provide much heat. It does act as an energy reserve, so we can call upon that energy and actually get it when we need it if we go without calories for a period of time. It's an insulator, protector, and acts as a cushion, and it may be an endocrine organ. It can produce estrogen for us. In fact, that is the main source of estrogen that is produced when we become menopausal as women. Or even when you have too much white fat around, it actually produces the hormone estrogen. So we can be estrogen dominant if we have too much yellow fat. The yellow fat also contains receptors for other hormones like insulin, growth hormone, adrenaline, cortisol. Yellow fat has been thought of as its own endocrine organ because where do all the toxins go? Where does your body store excessive stuff when it comes in and it can't use it? It stores it in the yellow fat. So white fat and yellow fat, they can be friends. They can interact with each other. Research does show that when people overeat, they not only increase their amount of white fat, but the overconsumption will actually cause that yellow fat or that brown fat to become dysfunctional. So the brown fat that's thermic and producing energy as heat actually becomes downregulated and dysfunctional when white fat takes over.
Okay, so the fat has several functions, of course, and we don't want to think it's all bad because it has some things that we absolutely need. How many think it's important to have healthy skin and hair? That's good. How many know it's important, as Dr. Michelle touched on, to have healthy body temperatures? Now think about it. If brown fat is more thermal and it produces heat, and we have a lot of white fat that's outnumbering the brown fat, and it does as we age and does as we accumulate excess body fat, then the body's going to be typically colder, right? Okay, makes sense? All right. We also need to have cellular function. Fat is required to make cells function normally. So when we go low fat or no fat, or even I should say very low fat and no fat, that is not good for our cells. We have to have that in our cells to make them function. As Dr. Michelle said, it's a cushioning effect. And it's not cushion that you want to have around your belly. I'm not talking about that. It does cushion the organs and tissues a little bit. So that's actually a good function. It's a shock absorber for the bones. How many knew that? I thought that was fascinating to determine that. It assists with the absorption of these fat-soluble vitamins. How many know that A, D, E, and K are all fat-soluble vitamins? Most people today are vitamin D deficient. Some of that is because we don't get outside as much as we used to, so we should be taking a vitamin D. We should also have a companion vitamin K, especially K2, with the vitamin D in the form or in the amount of about 50 micrograms up to even 100 micrograms. It is helpful if you take those things with fats because it helps them get absorbed better, right? Makes sense? And also fat can be a wonderful immune system booster, okay?
So here's where it goes from good to bad. You know, we talked about what are the good parts about fat. So what are the dangers of excess body fat? Well, we all know that it can lead to obesity. Well, what's bad about that? For every pound you're overweight, it's 10 pounds on your joints. So 10 times 10 is 100. 20 times 10 is 200. 30 times 10 is 300. How is that pounding down on your joints every single day? 300 pounds is going to take you to the orthopedic doctor early because we've got arthritis of the back.
I just wanted to put this up there for one more thing that I typically do when I use this in the class. You ready? Some of you know what's coming. Okay, just like to do that. Makes me feel good. Just got my wife off track.
1 second. So it can actually lead to arthritis, which is inflammation of the joints. And as we all know, inflammation is the precursor to all chronic sickness and disease. All chronic sickness and disease starts with inflammation first, and oftentimes it starts with the nutrition that we're taking in that is causing us to become obese and resistant to the very fuel that we are designed to take in. Excess inflammation, arthritis, being overweight can cause fatigue. Think about 10 pounds, 20 pounds, 30 pounds, 300 pounds. How are we going to feel at the end of the day carrying around a 300-pound backpack? Tired. What's that going to do to your mind? Mental fatigue, maybe almost depression, early onset heart disease, stroke, diabetes, cancer, depression. Who caused all that? The one looking at you back in the mirror, looking right at you, causing all that increased toxic burden. It's really amazing today that the increased toxic burden is becoming a far more higher burden because the fat cells are taking up more and more and more of these soluble fats that we're putting in our systems that are coming from the standard American diet. Isn't that sad? The dangers of excess body fat.
Now, needless to say, the trends don't bode well for us. When we're talking about obesity trends, we have to look at a couple of different angles at this. Currently, this one began in 1960 and is predicted out to 2030. Now, that's not too far away. Some of you that have been around the block a few years, you would have thought 2030 was never going to get here. But I remind you right now, it's 2018. That is just 12 years away. And as my parents told me when I was small, as we age, time goes faster. It's amazing how that happens. But I want you to notice the consistency of this thing. This thing is so smooth and consistent, it's more predictable than the stock market. Okay? Now, this is a prime time. We saw from 1976 to about 2000, something happened. You see that sharp incline, right? It kind of went up a little bit more than most. So the trend changed. It went higher quicker. What happened at that time? We got this brilliant idea that fat was bad. It was just brilliant, just a brilliant thing the government did for us. It said fat's bad, so we're going to say we got to lower fat down and we got to increase grains and breads to the tune of about 6 to 11 servings per day. And by the way, because fat is bad, we've got to find a substitute for fats called trans fats that are really just another wonderful invention. And we put those in the processed food, taking fats out because fats are bad. And of course, if we take fat out, we're not going to get fat. Well, what happened? We got fatter and got sicker. And this torched our society. But the bottom line is processed foods became very profitable. Now, we're not government conspiracy theorists, but I will tell you, simply put, do not believe everything that you're told in media, because look at the results. You've got to ask yourself the question, as Dr. Phil asked many times on TV, how's it working for you? And frankly put, it's not. We have really blown it in this one. The trends do not lie. We went back to 76 or 60 and up to 2030. But check this one out. This is amazing. Let's bring it a little more current. Let's bring this from 2015, just 3 years ago, and shoot it out to 2035. Are we on a good path? Not at all. I've got to ask you a question. Is this acceptable? Are we okay with this? Because if it's the norm and we say it's okay, then we're saying it's acceptable. But ladies and gentlemen, here's where we are. Society says it's acceptable, society says it's normal, and society will tell you that Dr. Michelle and I are being abnormal and we are radical just because we're trying to be in shape. Now that's facts, okay? We go in a place and it makes people very uncomfortable. And frankly, I don't know why, because we love people. But it doesn't fit with the norm in society. And how many in here and how many online have children and grandchildren? Raise your hand if you do. Okay. Is this acceptable for our children and our children's children? Okay. Then why do we contribute to it? Why do we think it's funny? It's simply not. We have to do something. We have to stand up. And tonight we're going to give you some real tools how to do that, because I think we've laid the case that fat is not bad, but in excess on our bodies, it can become very bad, can become disease-causing.
So what about genetics? Do genetics matter? You know, we're really all just a bunch of alphabet soup. Our DNA, it's not just your blue genes, but your genetic genes that really matter. Now, you get your genes from your mom and from your dad. You get one allele from mom and one from dad. And if you get two of the same one, that might be the wild type, the one that gives you all the good stuff. If you get one from mom that's not so good and one from dad that's good, it's heterozygote. It's kind of got some not so good function. If you get the homozygote, both the bad ones, boy, that polymorphism, that SNP, you might just have some genes that the genes are the loaded gun, and the environment that you put on those genes pulls the trigger. So just because you're born with the genes that you are born with does not mean that those genes have to own you with chronic sickness and disease. And it's just really exciting that we're on the forefront of precision medicine today, being able to know what our genetics are, because now we can start to see our genes, and are we predisposed for things like insulin resistance, body mass index problems, being overweight? Are we sensitive to a carbohydrate load? Are we sensitive to a lipid load? What happens when we put those things on a gun that's already loaded? Is that gun gonna go off early? Now we can start to see those things. In fact, there are some genes that we can measure, like the PPAR gamma, peroxisome proliferator activated receptor gamma.
Can you say that one more time, please?
Sure. Peroxisome proliferator activated receptor gamma.
I love it when she talks to me like that. It's so awesome. Just got my wife off again one more time.
That gene is actually believed to be involved with fat cell differentiation. In fact, the transcription factor, it's actually activated by fatty acids. And individuals that have the homozygote variation, they actually make fat cells easier than their counterparts. What about the FTO, or the fat mass and obesity associated gene? Individuals that have this gene, actually this particular gene, these genes are present in highly metabolically active tissues like your heart, your liver, your kidneys, adipose tissue, and particularly in the brain, the hypothalamus. You know, we talk about that hypothalamic, pituitary, adrenal axis, gonadal axis, that endocrine axis. This particular gene plays a large role in the regulation of the hypothalamus. You know, it's associated with energy expenditure. It's associated with energy intake, so how satiated you may or may not become. What's your appetite like? It's associated with the inability to know that you're full. So people with the FTO genes that are homozygote with that gene, they already have a loaded gun. There are some other genes that are really interesting, like the ADRB2, adrenergic receptor beta 2 genes. There's a couple of these.
Like we've all heard many times, the adrenergic beta receptor 2.
ADRB2 genes. This is like precision medicine. But these are involved in the mobilization, meaning mobility of fat cells from the fat for energy when you exercise. So if your body actually cannot get access to that fat in those cells, it's going to be really hard for that individual to actually lose weight. In fact, individuals with the homozygote type, they are more likely to gain and lose and regain more weight than their counterparts. The loaded gun is already there. It's just waiting for you to pull the trigger with what you put on it. So we really have to emphasize lifestyle to improve weight management and how much fat is on the frame when we know that these genes are present. It gives us a tool. So another ADRB2 gene, adrenergic receptor beta 2 gene, has been associated with carbohydrate intake. People that have the ADRB2 gene, they may be less likely to mobilize fat stores and have a greater risk of obesity when they have a carbohydrate intake that is above 40%. And if you look at the food pyramid, what percentage of our nutritional protocol were we supposed to intake from carbohydrates? It's almost close to 80%. 6 to 8 servings of grains and bread a day. And we're still trying to train ourselves away from the excessive carbohydrate lifestyle, that sugar burning metabolism. We're still trying to get ourselves out of the sugar burning metabolism. So you can see if you've got FTO genes and you've got a couple ADRB2 genes, how you not only have to pay attention to your exercise, you also have to pay close attention to what you load the gun with as far as carbohydrates and fats. In fact, the ADRB3 gene, it's associated with an increased body mass index and weight loss resistance in the face of exercise. So these individuals can exercise, go to the gym 6 days a week, do high intensity training, and still walk out and not lose a pound. So we have to be able to see what it is to help them crack the code for their specific genetic type to help them maximize their time in the gym and what they're putting on their plate as fuel for their long-term outcome to avoid pulling the trigger on the gun. You start to see how that all plays together. It's like a musical symphony.
And it sounds pretty cool when it's tuned right. But a bad tuned symphony sounds pretty crappy, actually. But as you can kind of guess from us, we've done genetics a lot, and having this genetic knowledge with a practitioner oversight to guide you in the development of the proper plan to maximize your excess fat loss, I think is critical for everyone. This is a classic example of why one plan does not work the same for another person. And I've seen that build incredibly frustrating relational problems with people. Well, you must be cheating because, you know, it's not working for you, it's working for me, et cetera, et cetera. But people need different specificities when it comes to exercise and nutrition. Some people can't take in a high amount of excess fat, some people can. We've seen thousands already around the country take advantage of this with great success. So as far as I'm concerned, everyone needs to have their genetics looked at in regard to especially this as far as the excess fat, because it's such a problem in our society and it's such a source of much confusion in how do you get this fat off of here forever. Okay? Now, not to be too complicated, but we really want to kind of look at a little bit of biochemistry here. This is a Krebs cycle. The Krebs cycle occurs inside of the mitochondria of cells. The mitochondria is a powerhouse of the cells. So it just makes sense that the cells in the parts of the body that exhibit the most energy production, such as the heart, the brain, and the muscles, they have the most mitochondrial dense cells. Mitochondria can be created, mitochondrial biogenesis, by exercise, by the need for energy. If we need more energy, the body will create more. Pretty cool like that. But if we don't exercise, guess what happens to our mitochondrial function? It goes down because we don't need to produce energy. Energy is necessary for all parts of our body. But did you know you can turn the body into a chronic fat burning engine? The body is not, and I repeat, not designed to run dominated by carbohydrate sources. It's not designed to do that. No matter what you've been told, it's designed to operate predominantly from fat. If it's driven by carbohydrate sources, you're going to get a lot of cell turnover, a lot of stress, a lot of increased inflammation. And if you get a damaged cell, let's just suffice it to say that carbohydrates and or sugars are going to stick to sort of cancerous cells and make those things replicate at a much higher rate. Okay? It makes no sense to feed a sick person sugars because they're going to get sicker. So the fats, when we turn our body into a fat-burning system, and you can kind of see the graph, the chart behind us at the top, the fats, carbohydrates, and proteins, those are known as the macronutrients, macro meaning large. And out of those, the body extracts the micronutrients. And you can see some of the micronutrients down there, possibly like the B vitamins, the manganese, the magnesium, the carnitine, etc., that comes out to make that energy be produced effectively. It just makes sense that if we eat a lot of foods that are nutrient deficient, is this system going to run? No, because it has no nutrients, no cofactors to make it run. If we take in the right quality foods, the right amount of good quality fats, not the fake fats, but the good quality fats, and the right carbohydrates, and earth-shattering news, a carbohydrate is a fruit and a vegetable, not just a grain. Okay, so carbohydrates are consistent with fruits and vegetables. That's what we're supposed to eat. We're not supposed to eat other. And the right amount of proteins. We can cause our body to become a fat-burning engine all the time, where fat becomes your fuel source, whether it comes in exogenously from the outside or it's endogenously produced, and the body runs very effectively. Now, the fats in our body are converted to what's called ketone bodies. And I didn't say keystone, I said ketone, K-E-T-O-N-E, ketone bodies. They're very beneficial for fueling the body and also fueling the brain. They improve physical athletic performance, which is cool. Sustained fat loss, which is nice. And the process kind of has a dual function. Ketogenesis, or the synthesis or the making of ketones, and ketolysis, the breakdown of ketones. So you produce them and then you break them down. There's two main ketone bodies, acetoacetate, known as ACAC, and then 3-beta-hydroxybutyrate. We'll just call it BHB for short. She likes when I talk to her like that too. It's cool.
One more time?
Yeah, beta-hydroxybutyrate. Love it. So these are the two main sources, and the acetone is kind of a third. When we do urine testing here, we look for acetone to be dumped out in the urine. That's an indicator that we're having ketone production or ketone synthesis inside the body at the time, which is good. The body does very well burning on these ketones, especially the beta-hydroxybutyrate or the BHB. And as you can see, those are exogenous ketones sometimes, because tonight, believe it or not, you actually were fed in your drink. How many like to drink? That was BHB. So you guys got a lot of brain fuel tonight, which is cool. So I can tell you're so in tune to this thing and you're alert. It worked. We had brain fuel. We call that the Sherwood Brain Retrain Shake. And so the body works very well on that. You know, I'll have my ketones that I'll put in during the course of the day, but it's very important that those will not substitute for a system that's not fat adapted. Okay? You must do things right, force the system to be fat adapted, and then put in the BHB from the outside, and it can actually help the internally produced BHB. Make sense? So we want to be a fat-adapted engine. That's optimal for our health.
So we're getting excited about the benefits of a fat-burning system. Let's just kind of review some of those benefits. Excessive yellow fat starts to go away. It starts to melt off. And our bodies start to become less toxic. Isn't that exciting? How many of you agree that's exciting? Our bodies start to detoxify better. That means we offload our livers, we offload our internal organs of detoxification from carrying around all this excess yellow fat. Did you know that the #1 cause of non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, which means fatty liver in the United States, is excessive high fructose corn syrup consumption? It causes fatty liver. So by turning our systems into a fat-burning engine and getting away from all that high fructose corn syrup and all that stuff that we've been fed for years, we get excessive yellow fat reduction, improvement in detoxification, internal organ regeneration. That equals health. Isn't that exciting? What's the precursor to all chronic sickness and disease? Can everybody say all? What is it? Inflammation. So if we are taking down inflammation by putting our bodies in a fat-burning state, we are reducing all of the things that we are deathly afraid of. Diabetes, heart disease, stroke, cancer, living a life of suffering. So what does that mean for us? It means improved energy. How many of you want to show up every day with improved energy? I do. A little bit longer, a little bit stronger with improved mental clarity. Just like Dr. Mark talked about those ketones, the brain loves ketones. It prefers it over sugar. But we've got to get off the sugar crack train and get our bodies used to burning fat. Sugar really is like breaking an addiction to crack cocaine because it works on the same center in the brain that cocaine works on. It's that pleasure center. Well, we have to eat every day, so turning your engine into a fat-burning engine is not always comfortable. There's some withdrawals, some behavioral changes, some addictive behavior that has to be addressed and assessed so that we can have all of these things like improved detoxification, improved energy, improved mental clarity, decreased elimination, decreased chronic sickness and disease, so we can show up every day stronger, longer. A fat-burning engine also improves sleep. Well, how does it do that? If we start taking off all that excessive stimulus from sugar, which is producing a hormonal imbalance with insulin and causing our body's circadian rhythm to kind of get disrupted, what do we do better when we lay down to go to sleep at night if we're in a fat-burning state? Sleep. Like we're normally, naturally designed and intended to do. We sleep better. You know, did you know that 75% of all doctor visits have fatigue as a component? What if it's because we've got too much excessive yellow fat and we're in a chronic sugar burning state causing endocrine disruption every single day of our lives? We've just never been taught about it. We've never really thought about it that way. That I, myself, looking in the mirror, are the cause of the majority of my ails. Me. So we get to do something about it. And we're going to talk to you about 7 steps that are guaranteed to reduce excess yellow fat.
So everyone say guaranteed. Guaranteed. I guarantee you this will work 100% of the time. Number 1, you got to go to a plant-based diet. We didn't say all plant, we didn't say vegan, but plants have got to become the focus. Our bodies are designed to eat plants, and they've got to come from the anti-inflammatory varieties, and we're going to tell you what those are. Number 2, you got to learn to sleep. Sleep's not a waste of time. We culturally have kind of been taught that. We culturally have even talked ourselves into saying ridiculous things like, I only need 4 hours of sleep a night. No, you need more. You just learn to exist in a survival mode, driving your cortisol, which is driving your body fat, driving inflammation, and driving sickness and disease conditions. Number 3, we got to exercise regularly. Our legs are made to do more than hang over a chair. Our arms are made to do more than do what I call the fork curl or the can curl. Number 4, we got to practice intermittent fasting. We've been taught erroneously, everybody say erroneously. Erroneously. That means wrong. We've been taught wrongly that we have to eat small, frequent meals. And that's not true. The body is simply not designed to process that inundation of food all the time. with the exception of being an elite level athlete that's moving all the time and burning a lot of calories that needs them. Most Americans are not elite level athletes. So the bottom line is we need to eat less often. Eat less often, but eat better. Number 5 is we got to learn to speak life. We're going to talk about that a little bit later in a second. Number 6, exercise caution with relationships. 7, and exhibit some courage. And we're going to go into all these a little bit, but this process absolutely works. We've seen this time and time again with people who simply embrace this simple 7-step process. We've never, not one time seen this process fail. All we repeatedly say to everyone is this: trust us on this one. Go all in, no question. You can't dilly-dally or be halfway in with your health. Go all in and you will see results without question.
So the foods that you want to eat, what do we want to eat? Anti-inflammatory foods are our focus. So what are they? Quality proteins. We want to go organic, as clean and lean as possible. We want to do grass-fed, grass-finished. Grass-fed, grass-finished. If it's just grass-fed, they can fill that cow with antibiotics and still feed it all the corn they want in the last little time frame of its life to fatten it up. It's grass-fed, but it's not grass-finished. You're still consuming all those antibiotics and all that high fructose corn syrup that creates non-alcoholic steatohepatitis or fatty liver disease. So organic, grass-fed, grass-finished quality protein. Free range. Get your chickens free range if you can, not in a cage. Free range where they can eat what they're designed and intended to eat. And wild-caught fish. Not raised in a farm. What about oils and fats? We do need to focus on healthy oils. Remember, fat's not a bad thing. In fact, our brains are 60% fatty matter, fatty acid material. So if we go on a low-fat diet and starve ourselves of good, healthy fatty acids for 30 years, what are our brains looking like?
Mush.
They haven't had the good fatty acids that they need. In fact, if we do an omega-3 index on the majority of red-blooded Americans, most omega index scores are severely low, which means we need more good oils. We don't need to overdo the fats, but we need more good oils coming from olive oil, coconut oil, avocados, nuts, and seeds, your good oily fishes, good, healthy oils. Low glycemic fruits, what are they? Berries, apples, semi-ripe bananas, the ones that don't shoot your blood sugar way up and over if you have a blood sugar issue. Not everybody does, but we want to focus on low glycemic fruits that have a high antioxidant content. And low glycemic, non-root, non-starchy vegetables. You can get into just as much trouble eating white potatoes at every meal as you can with pasta, breads, grains, because those white potatoes, believe it or not, do break down into simple sugars and cause blood sugar elevation, just like a couple pieces of bread. So it's just about education and starting to understand that we really need to go green, lean, and clean. Let's everybody say it. Green, lean, and clean, which is the anti-inflammatory, non-disease causing, continual healing, and improved fat utilization plan. It's pretty simple. Fresh and raw fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds, and good clean protein. Everything that the good Lord made right here on earth. No box, no package, no need for additives, preservatives, and other metabolic waste. Just good eats.
Now, it should be said, although there's things we need to take and there's also things we need to avoid. We didn't want to do these first because it's not about, what you shouldn't do. It's really about what you should do. You always go about what you can do and you focus on what you can't do later on. You don't spend time on the things. These are the things you got to avoid. They must be avoided. Bottom line, nothing good will come from any consumption of these in any quantities whatsoever. Nothing. Everyone say nothing. Nothing. We should not eat them, encourage others to eat them, or give them to others unless they're our enemies and we want to kill them. I'm serious. So let me ask you a question, ladies and gentlemen. If we give these to children, shall I ask the question further, or do you get the point? Yes. See, we have got to grow up and remember that it's not about weight, meaning skinny, you're healthy. That's not true. Meaning you're overweight, you're unhealthy. That's not true. It's about the accumulation of excess fatty tissues on the body, as Dr. Michelle says. You can be skinny fat. This is about health optimization and disease prevention and or reversal. The benefits of avoiding these foods will happen without doubt. You just got to avoid this, because when you avoid this, chronic excess body fat accumulation simply will not occur. Now, you're going to see things in there that are quite controversial. I know the breads and grains, I get it. But the bottom line is seeds have been genetically modified to avoid the effects of Roundup when they're sprayed in the processing of them. Roundup has a constituent called glyphosate. Glyphosate goes down in the soil. It's liquid. Eventually, what's in the soil gets into the root system, into the plant. So therefore, you have plants that are testing positive for glyphosate. So what's the big deal? Glyphosate causes cancer. Why is our cancer line flatlined over the last 40 years? Why are we losing that war horribly? Corn, soy, they're processed the same way. You don't need to eat them. Nobody needs to eat them. Just the way it is. And we want to be honest with you about that, because if people want to get well, they need to have the tools necessary to get well, and they need to have some truth behind it. Okay?
So sleep's mandatory, right? We've kind of overemphasized that or emphasized it and put an emphasis on it. Why? Because it produces many important hormones like melatonin and serotonin, and it has this magical balance with cortisol. In fact, cortisol, it's one of the things that can be disrupted if we're not sleeping. And cortisol is produced by the zona fasciculata of the adrenal gland, and it actually, when it's produced, it tells your body that it's really kind of stressed, and it says, hey, make some blood sugar for me. So individuals who are producing a lot of cortisol are making blood sugar even if they're not eating. So they can actually be gaining weight or weight loss resistant because they're producing cortisol secondary to stress. And cortisol will eventually wear and tear the system down to where it actually can't recover anymore. And cortisol is also married to a hormone called melatonin. Melatonin is the hormone of sleep. It starts to come up around 8 o'clock at night. Yes, everybody's starting to yawn. The sun is going down and the moon is coming up, and melatonin production is starting to happen to signal the Sandman to take you to bed for that good night sleep. So if that signal is missed, guess what? The hormone really isn't produced like it should be, so we don't get our good night's sleep like we should, and we start off the day a little bit behind with our circadian rhythm and internal clock not really knowing where it's at. So if we interrupt those natural circadian rhythms and that internal clock, then we're thinking, well, I'm really not sleeping very well, but it's actually secondary to our behaviors and what we're actually doing that's causing the stressor. So we can actually help ourselves get better sleep by our lifestyle management.
So we've mentioned intermittent fasting, and I wanted to explain exactly what we meant by that. We're talking about 12 to 18 hours or a little bit more. That's optimum. So don't let the word fasting scare you. There is some spiritual benefit, of course, but this is also about physical benefit. A good fast for us looks like this. About 6 o'clock p.m., let's say tonight, we would have our last meal. We would not eat again until about 12 o'clock p.m. the next day. So 12 o'clock p.m. or noon the next day would be our breakfast. Breakfast means we break a fast. So whenever we break that fast, that can be breakfast. Breakfast doesn't have to occur in the morning. It can occur anytime, correct? So during that period of time that we're not in a fed state, the body has a chance to deal with other things, specifically reparation, regeneration, rebuilding. Those are good things. So you're going to see two hormones kind of have a massive effect. Insulin, which when it's chronically elevated is going to cause fat storage, it goes down. Typically in a fast, it'll drop down to 2 or 3 or even less than that, which is amazing because it also activates more fat burning at that point. You also see sometimes growth hormone can elevate because the body can really focus on repairing things, which is like awesome at that point, right? So you want to start easy on this. You don't want to jump right into it tonight, specifically if your body hasn't been adapted, because you will go into a hypoglycemic moment because your body's used to running on carbohydrates. So you do not do this until you have specific practitioner monitoring and or approval and guidance in it, or you'll get yourself into trouble. You'll get lightheaded and want to fall out. That's not a good thing. We don't want to go into hypoglycemia because guess what that does? It drives cortisol. Okay, it creates more stress. So please understand, when this is used properly, intermittent fasting can give some amazing healing benefits emotionally, spiritually, and physically. So it's a very, very cool process when done correctly.
So exercise, we all know we need to exercise. We need to exercise regularly, right? How many think we should exercise every day? I used to be the exercise Nazi and say, for every day you want to eat, you need to exercise. Until I learned about precision medicine and genetics and realized that some people can't exercise every day. Some people need a little bit of recovery time. Some people have to have lighter exercise because their muscle fiber types won't take it. So exercise type can be very individual. You want to like what you do. You want to show up to the gym and enjoy it. You know, whether it's group, whether it's individual, whether it's a yoga class, you want to enjoy it and you want it to fit your body. You know, the typicals are 5 to 6 days a week. And we know for bone health, 3 days a week of resistance training is minimum, especially when our hormones change and decline. That 3 days a week is very essential for the muscles to pull on the tendons, which deposit the minerals in the bones. It's the signal to the bones to, hey, you got to stay strong. So without resistance training, we're not getting that signal to the bones to, hey, you got to put those minerals in here. 3 days is the minimum. The American Heart Association and Cardiovascular Association recommend strongly 150 minutes a week of cardiovascular exercise. If we want our bones to stay strong, we got to do the work. If we want our heart to stay strong, that pump, you got to push it a little bit. It needs to know it's got a challenge other than just getting up and out of a chair. Or even if you're active during the day, that's not stressing your heart and teaching your heart that it's got something to show up for better the next day. So we want to make sure that we're pushing our bones, we're pushing our heart, so we can maintain our, not weight, but our body composition. And we need to be very mindful of our body composition and our exercise style and type as the years go by, because you only get one temple to live in and you are with it right now. That temple is yours. It's yours to take care of. With all of the tips that we give you, you get to be the delegator of that life.
Speaking of life, what do we mean by speaking of life? This is amazing. Do you know words actually create? They change environment. We're very careful when we speak to speak words of affirmation and words of positivity and words of belief, words of hope. Because words of the lack thereof in all those areas changes the whole environment too. You see, words actually mean something, and the environment with which we put our body in is very important. Dr. Michelle mentioned the genes load the gun and the environment does what? Pulls the trigger. Did you know the words that you speak changes the environment and can pull the trigger? You got to watch what you say. We see a lot of people that say things like this, oh, I could never do that. Well, guess what you just did? You made that positive in your life. You're right, you can't. Or I could never change during the holiday season and quit eating junk. I could never stop viewing poison as now I view it as a treat. You see, you have to learn to change things. Change is really mandatory. Being honest tonight, how many have found yourself, not just about food, but in behaviors in general of things that you really wanted to do, but you just weren't doing what you should do? How many find yourself in a negative speaking pattern at times? Very common. It's very culturally normal and it's accepted, but these patterns change neurochemistry in your brain. The brain's very plastic. It will move, it will change. It's like these chemical highways that have been built so effectively for so long, they become automatic. And eventually, guess what happens after you've spoken these words enough? You don't have to speak the words anymore. You just think the thought, and the chemicals, man, they'll go. And you got a whole cascade of negativity, stress-giving chemicals in your body. Guess what that are doing? Driving cortisol up, which is driving fat storage. You got to speak life. If your speech pattern is non-life-giving on a repetitive and frequent basis, it's time to change. It's time to change. And you start right now with what you say. The words have got to stop right here at your lips if they're negative before they come out. If we do that, I guarantee it takes time, it takes practice, but practice does do what? Makes perfect. You got to practice that.
So you want to exhibit care with who you spend your time with. Groups can be very influential, just like this. This is a group that's designated to change your mind and your heart around how you live your life and your lifestyle. We know that peer pressure is very, very, very strong. We can't depend on the majority to actually support us in a healthy lifestyle. Here, just have one. Just have one piece of chocolate. Oh, why aren't you eating the cake? What's the matter with you?
Just one bite of the apple.
We don't cheat on our marriages. We don't cheat on our finances. We don't cheat on our taxes. Why do we cheat on this thing we call nutrition? I'm not saying it's not okay to have a piece of cake every now and then, but to make the decision that you're going to have the cake instead of the cake having you. That's the difference. There is a difference. And you want to be so strong in your mind and heart that distractions and temptations that are everywhere, they don't own you. Because you got that. You know that. You're smarter than that. You understand the physiology of that. And you want to know that in your mind and heart. And just start evaluating and analyzing and watching the patterns of the most common people that are in your life. What are they doing? How are they behaving? How are they supporting you? Are they helping your change? And are they helping you modify your life? It's something for us to really think about. Who are we hanging out with that is helping us live and lead a healthy life?
And number 7 in our 7 guarantees is this. You've got to exhibit courage. Enough said, we must have courage. Courage is what our country is built upon, and in this area we have not exhibited courage because we've let the culture defeat us. We let the culture become what drives us instead of us changing the culture. I've often said, in kind of not what we do, but when you're stepping out in an area that takes courage, I would rather stand all by myself alone than to stand in the wrong. It takes courage to stand alone. But guess what happens? There's plenty of people to support you standing in the wrong. There's plenty of people who are going to support you if you want to accumulate excess body fat. Man, it's like everywhere. You can just jump right in. Go have the bag of chips, all that. Just fine. Do what everybody else does. It's fine. But we wanted to give you the choices with information with which you can select from. We believe in that. We've got to stand up against the culture and bring about change. Don't expect the majority, as Dr. Michelle said, to support what we're talking about tonight. It's just not going to happen. But like any good movement, it has to start with a group of people that believe big. And change must occur in us right here as individuals before we can change anybody else. I can't stand up here and work with Dr. Michelle and tell you it's not right for us from an ethical standpoint or morality standpoint to tell you to do something that we're not doing. I promise you that. Now, if you think it takes work, it does. We've been doing it a long time, but we still have to practice that every day to get better at it because...
I like a piece of cake.
Yeah. We can't crack. We can't... What would you do if you saw us out doing something that we've told you not to do? You would go, well, if it's okay for you, it must be okay for me. So we've got to learn to love ourselves enough to have courage to make the change we need to make, despite what everybody else does. And I promise you this amazing thing will occur. When we make the change in ourselves, people will be drawn to you and they'll begin to change with you. Not all of them, but all it takes is one. A life changed by one person is a life worthy of being lived. Truly is. We can't accept where we are right now. You saw the obesity trends. You saw the direction we're going by 2030 and 2035 in the graphs, respectively. We can't continue on that path and expect good things to happen. And that's why we're really passionate about why, we put on this class at this time of year, because this time of year is notorious for people wanting to start all over and undo what has been done. And why do we have to have New Year's resolutions in the first place on January 1st or 2nd? Why can't we have them on whatever day of the week and day of the month the calendar says today? Why is that not the norm? We would submit that that can be the norm.